this week we're making more progress on our kitchen project by putting a countertop and a sink in. Stay tuned and see how fun and easy this is to do. Alright, the first step to making our kitchen counter that I'm going to take is to create the covering for my kitchen countertop. You don't have to do this. You could just go to the craft store and buy a piece or a couple of pieces to be sure you have enough of scrapbooking paper that looks like stone or wood or whatever you want your countertop to look like. It could be plain colored, it could be whatever you want it to be. I'm painting mine on this piece, on some pieces of great white premium cardstock. This is a smooth textured cardstock from I've got this at Giant Fabrics. Michael's has a version. I'm sure Hobby Lobby has a version. Every craft store probably has a version of this. I'm using 12 by 12 so I can get by with probably one sheet to do the countertop. Now, a disclaimer here. I've actually finished the project, but I had editing difficulties with my video clips that I used and I lost a couple. This one I'm going to recreate by making another sheet of paper the same way I did for the video. This is going to look different than the one you'll see me work with later in this video because I can't recreate it exactly. So we are going to create something that looks like stone. We're going to start out with one of our ink colors that we used. We're going to use the lightest colored one. I played with these. I didn't like how they worked. So we're going to just smooth this. I spray this with a little water because my ink pad is getting way, way, way too dry. But we're just going to make a background of this. And we're just going to rub it across the paper. Cover the whole sheet. Get your whole sheet of paper covered with your lightest color if you're doing this the way I am. Now, because I didn't like how these worked on I tried several different ideas for different ways to use my ink, and I didn't like any of the effects I was getting. I decided to go with some paint. So I'm using a raw sienna craft paint, and I'm using an espresso craft paint. These are both ceramic coat. And I have a ceramic tile here. We're going to go with this one first. You'll just need a little tiny drop. And I've got a sponge. And I've got some water. And I'm going to get that wet, and I'm going to see where I laid my paintbrush. I'm going to use the handle of my paintbrush to mix that into the water. I don't want much paint. I want a little more paint than that, though. Alright, you don't need anywhere near that much. Dip sponge in and sponge it off on here. You can use anything you want. You could use a round sponge. And I'm just going to sponge paint. I'm just going to make marks. Okay? I'm not going to do the whole sheet because I'm just doing this to show you what I did on the part of the video that got ruined. Then I took the brown and I did the same thing with the brown. A little bit of brown paint, some water, mix it together. You can either use the same sponge like I did, or you could use a different one. I did an entire 12 by 12 inch sheet because I want to be able to pick and choose, and I may want to use some more of it later. Now, for the really fun part, I have this Luminaire metallic gold paint. Now, you could use any metallic gold paint. This is just my favorite one for playing with on this. Couple of drops of paint. Oh, and when you use one of these with this kind of top, when you get it done, hit it on the table and try and knock some of that paint down out of that narrow top. I've got a paintbrush on a fairly soft paintbrush. Mix quite a bit of water in. And just splash some gold. And this is going to make a mess, so if you've got a surface that you don't want to get paint on, be sure that you protect it. But that's basically how I did the process on the sheet I used. Then I let this dry, and I coated it with a spray of acrylic sealer. Any acrylic sealer will work. I used the same one I used for the fake wood for the cabinets. The other piece of footage I lost was putting together a pattern to be able to cut my countertop. So for that, be sure and check the blog post. I'll try and write out the directions for that. But you've seen me do that before in videos. So if you've watched my videos before, you've seen me make a pattern with little pieces of paper and just tape them together to cover the surface. So from here, let's go ahead and make that counter. Alright, so now we've got our pattern created, and this fits really well. I'm happy with this. It'll be fine by the time we and I cut it so it's 2 inches deep. It barely goes past the front of the cabinet, and when we cover it with paper, that will add enough that it will make a nice overhang. So now we need to figure out where our sink is going. Oh, and I also cut one here that's the right size for that, for the small cabinet. So now we need to make a template for our sink, because we'll have to cut our sink out of our countertop before we put the paper on it that we created. So what I did, I decided to go ahead and use this single basin sink. It's 1 inch by 2 inches, so I cut a 1 inch by 2 inch piece out of here, and I fiddled with it. I made sure that it was the right size. This is just a piece of a cereal box. So that's the size I need it. Put that off to the side so I don't lose it. Now I have a post-it notepad. And I'm using not the free side, but I'm going up here to where the edge is, where the glue is. And I'm going to trace my cutout in this. It doesn't have to be a perfect rectangle. This isn't going to show. And now we can cut this out. It would help if I would have remembered to bring my scissors. Actually, I don't need to be perfect. I can just do this with this. I just need something to run my knife against. Not a big deal. When I cut into the countertop, I'll need to have it right. But for this, I just need it. I'll go just outside that line. And I still might need to do a little fiddling with my hole once I get it cut. But I like this kind of sink. We won't have to finish the edge. It'll be fine. If you're using the double basin sink, you'll need to make sure that your opening has the paper wrapped down around it. So now when we go to cut our pattern, we'll be able to lay this over our sink area and cut it out. So move this out of the way. Now I debated what to use for the base for our countertops. In my Harrison, when I made countertops, I used wood, and that would work really well. But for this project, I'm trying to keep everything made of materials that anybody can use. It doesn't require any special tools. We've used a craft knife for just about everything, or a pair of scissors for just about everything we've done for this project. And that's why I'm sticking with something that can be cut with a craft knife. This is the back of a tablet. They're thicker than a cereal box or even a Bisquick box. If you don't have this, layer layers of the other together. Now, let's see where we need to be. Can we go on the edge? I don't. Yeah. I think we'll be fine there. So, we are going to trace around our pattern we made. And I'm going to keep this way to the corner. And this is just one of those yellow tablets that you get at Dollar Tree. It's not a fancy tablet. I do write a lot of things on these tablets, and I'm going to trace around this one too while I'm here. All right, now let's get our knife, and I'll have enough. I would have enough to do another set of countertops out of this. And this is pretty thick, so it's going to take a couple of strokes with your knife, and you'll need a nice sharp knife. Now, if you'd rather use wood, like I said, feel free to use wood. That's probably a better surface, but for this project, I wanted to make sure that everything was easy to do. And this end of my cabinet has this funny little curve, so I'm going to cut that into this. I'll go ahead and get this cut too, and then I can turn my paper, or my cardboard. Then after we get this cut, we're going to test it in the kitchen to make sure it fits. Whoops, I'm off. That's okay. Did we get it cut free? Not quite. You can always go to the back to finish your cut. All right, that can be put to the side. We can use it for another project at a later date. Let's try this out. Does this fit? Yes, it does. It fits beautifully. How about this one? It fits beautifully. All right, now, the next thing I do need to clean that edge up where I didn't cut completely straight. Now we need to put this down and figure out where we want our sink to be placed. And because it's made of a Post-it note, and we've got the Post-it note stickiness on there, it'll stay in place. And I like that. Do I like that position? Let me turn this towards myself so I can see what I'm doing. See, I'm going to fold this in half so I make sure that I'm centered. And I'm actually going to draw a line so that I can get this. Alright, so now I have a line drawn from the corner to here. This way I can line the sink up straight, and I've got lines drawn on here. Now I know that I need to miss where the corner of the cabinet comes. So I know that I need to be about a ½ inch back, which is kind of excessive, but Mrs. Doll's just going to have to reach. There. That will allow my cabinet to clear the fronts of my counters here. So now I am going to trace this with my pen first, because it will be easier to do that way. I'll leave the paper in place, but I'm going to trace it with this just in case it moves off on me. All right. Now, let's cut this. And I know I want to be a little bit there. Now you could put your sink anywhere on your run of cabinets that you want. Any place there's room. Sorry about that. I just bumped the tripod with my ruler. I really need to take a half a day and clean this table off. That's what I really need to be doing one of these days. Before I start recording the next video, I think that had better be my priority. Alright, so we've got that. Let's go ahead and try the sink in it. Do we need to? Now, it's a really snug fit, so I am going to take off just the tiniest bit on the back edge. Just a tiny, tiny sliver of paper. We don't want much. See if that fits. That is much better. And I think I can probably use an emery board to loosen up the ends a bit. So let's get our kitchen back. Now we need to trim this back just a little bit because we have this. This was to help us get everything glued in place. But now it's going to be in our way. And no one's ever going to see this part. Once we put the countertop on there, no one will see it again. Alright, there we go. Let's see if this fits. We want to make sure this is all ready. Now it fits just the way we want it to. So now I need to go get the paper we created and we can start gluing that down. Alright, so I have my paper. I'm going to cut this down about, I don't want to lose that. Give myself about a 1/2 inch overlap here. Doesn't have to be perfect. I just want to make sure I've got plenty to fold over the bottom edges. And you've still got quite a bit of this paper to use for another project. Now, because I don't want to get this cardboard wet, or even if I was using a really thin wood, I would really not want to get it sopping wet. Oh, let's cut a piece for this too. Before we forget, let's see. I think I like that spot right there. This one I don't need to have. Just cut off that. Now I'm going to take the back of my knife. I'm going to go like this and like this. And I'm just tracing my countertop. Now I'm going to fold. I scored it that way. So now I can fold on those score lines. Right there. Let's make sure that this fits. Okay. Let's see, let's go. Make sure that'll fold. Make sure that will fold. So I'm just cutting so I have tabs. Let's get a look at this. Alright, so that's going to work just fine. We'll make sure that that is right in the back corner. What do we have going on here? Just a little tiny bit off. There we go. Now, check that. Yes, it's going to work. So now we need to fit this one. So I'm going to start from the corner, I think, and cut a slash mark like this and like this. Scoring makes everything fold so much better. Remember, I'm using the back side of the blade, not the front. Just make sure that that folds on those lines. This is the end that's kind of crooked and weird. That's the end I want more finished, so I'm going to cut this, let's see. Make sure this is going to fold down before I cut these off. Sometimes you can fold those in and sometimes you can't. So that fits nicely. I'm not going to worry about that part that overlaps at the back yet. We'll just cut that extra tail off. Let's go ahead and get this done. Scored a little too deep there, but we'll fix that when we Mod Podge. These can go off. Alright, now that I have everything so it's folding down and it's nice and neat and none of our edges are showing. And we do have one area where I scored a little too deep, but that we can fix when we coat this with Mod Podge after this is put in place. So now we need to make sure we're putting this the right direction. We'll get our little one, and I am going to take a piece of notebook paper. And I'm going to use a glue stick. I want a relatively dry glue. I don't want to get that cardboard wet, because it is cardboard. It will warp if we get it too wet. Fold the ends in first, then pull our sides in. And there we go. So that one's glued. Let's go ahead and get this. I'm going to lay it down in such a way that it does not touch that glue, hopefully. But I don't want to get too much glue on my mat either. Yeah, I thought about what glue to use, and I was debating between spray glue and glue stick, and I know spray glue is hard for a lot of people because you do have to take it outside pretty much to spray it, and it smells bad, and not everybody likes to use it. And since these ends are going to be glued to the back, they will not be where they can be pulled off, and we are going to coat it with a finish. Alright. And glue stick is somewhat forgiving. It's not a completely permanent bond immediately. will need to be trimmed. And that will need to be trimmed. And we'll trim out that later when we get this all dry. Whoops, so now. And we can also use our, let's glue this down, because I did overscore that. That's okay, I'll show you how to fix that. I scored too deeply is what I did. So don't score too deeply, but if you do, you can glue it back. And then we'll just buff it. We'll just use some of our ink to blend that when we get this all dry. Alright, and it's on the back edge anyway, so this is on the front though. So make sure you've got any spots like that glued down. And really push it in place with your finger. Now, we're going to get both pieces, and we are going to put a ceramic tile over it with some weight on it, because we want to make sure that that dries flat and it dries with really good contact. So I need to let this dry, and when it's dry I'll be back and we'll go on to the next step. Alright, so this has sat overnight and it's completely dry. I'm kind of surprised, as cold as it is in here. But so the first thing I'm going to do this morning is kind of disguise this area. I'm just going to use a little bit of our ink pad, because this is going to go back against the wall. Can I get that in there? And once everything's glued in place, it's not going to show that much. I just want to kind of disguise any spots. Alright, that will do. Now we need to cut this opening. And since I've got a drop-in sink, I'm just going to cut it even, but I'll show you what you would do if you were using the other sink we made the other day on the Trash to Treasure. If you missed that, the sink here was made on a Trash to Treasure video earlier this week. Well, last week by the time this goes up, and so I will try to remember to link that in the blog post. So I'm cutting this part off so it's not going to show. And the first thing I want to do, excuse me, make some cuts here. Now, if you were using that one, we'll have to go all the way to the center and free this. Doesn't have to be neat. And then you would fold it down and make a finished edge, and then that sink would mount underneath once you got this all folded back nice and neat. But this sink is going to drop in, and so we don't need those edges. So this sink, I'm just going to do this. And then the sink will fit in just like this. I think I had it the other way before. So it looks like I'm going to have to do a little more trimming because the paper's making a little tight. Because I didn't get it quite to the edge. So I'm going to turn the camera off. I'm going to get this paper and everything trimmed back so this fits perfectly, and then I'll be back. Alright, so now I have that sized so that that will fit in, and it fits in nicely, but we're not going to install the sink yet. We need to get our countertop glued to our cabinets, and I am going to cut, there's a little spot here that I think might interfere with my sink, because I can see it. Your countertop on and make sure there's nothing protruding where you can see it. Alright, now we are going to use the 2 glue method. This is just tacky glue, and I'm going to run the tacky glue on all these spots. Now, where I put the lid. Now I need to run to my desk and get the super glue because I thought I brought it with me. All right, now I'm going to put a few drops of super glue, mainly in the corners. Now, push it up against the walls. Now, I'm going to find things like paint, Mod Podge. I'm going to go grab some more. That should do it. And weight that down. Oops, this side is trying to pull forward, so I'm going to need to hold that. And that glue needs to dry off camera. I'm going to go ahead and glue this one on. And when this glue is dry, I'll come back and we'll go on to the next step. Alright, so our glue is dry. I didn't get this quite against the wall there, but that's okay. We'll just ignore that part. Be sure and check all corners. I was so worried about not getting this one tight, I didn't check that one. Now we're going to coat our countertops with Mod Podge. I've got some satin Mod Podge. I don't want a huge shine. I just want to make this a little bit more finished looking. And because we sealed everything with the spray sealer, we can put the Mod Podge on without making our glue run, or our ink run. And we want to do this before we install our sink. So you have this all nice and finished. And use a really soft brush. I was hoping I had a sponge brush. That would have actually been better, but I couldn't find one this morning. So I'm using a really super soft brush. A soft brush will make less brush marks. So I'm going to coat this. I'll probably give it 2 coats of Mod Podge, letting it dry thoroughly in between. And when both coats are dry, I'll be back and we can finish up. Alright, so our sink is glued in, and the glue is still setting, but it's fine. But I've got my faucet that I made on another Trash to Treasure project a couple of weeks ago, the end of last month. We're going to put this in. And hopefully I've got that centered. And now that glue needs to set, and we are done for this. Alright, so now everything is in place. I love how this is coming out. I hope you have enjoyed this week's progress that we made on the kitchen. Be sure and check the blog post. I'll have links in there to the sink and the kitchen faucet that we've done in Trash to Treasure projects over the last several weeks. Be sure to check the Facebook page if you haven't, and if you'd like to help me make this channel better and to grow it more, be sure and check out my Patreon page. The link for that is also in the description box. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you later. Bye.